Our topic today is one that you may have experienced personally or through a family member or a friend: women battling cancer. I think it's fair to say there's not one of us that hasn't been touched by this. In 2024, more than 300,000 women were diagnosed with breast cancer, the most common cancer. That's 1 in 8 women. About 600,000 women face other cancer diagnoses each year. And still, in 2024, we don't have the answers we need to cure these cancers. My first guest today is Katrina Cooke. At 36 years old, as a single mother of 2 young boys, Katrina got the devastating news that she had stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. Her prognosis wasn't good. She was given just 12 months to live. Now she's gone through 224 chemo infusions, 54 radiation treatments, and 10 surgeries. She is a survivor, and she's a survivor who gives back to many cancer organizations in her community, including the Kay Yow Cancer Fund, named after the legendary North Carolina State University women's basketball coach, Kay Yow. Yow died in 2009 after a 22-year battle with breast cancer. Katrina, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story today. And I've interviewed so many women over the years, both as a TV reporter and as a podcaster, who've had cancer. But I think what's really important to note is that there are no two cases that are alike, correct?
Oh, exactly right. Everybody is.
You found out in kind of an unusual way. Tell us about that.
So I was injured in a kind of silly way, riding in the back of my brother in law's car as we were headed to tailgate for a UNC Duke game um, years ago. And we all piled into the same car, and I sat kind of in the back of the trunk part of his SUV with my arm kind of propped on a cooler. He hit the brakes really hard, and my shifted into the cooler. Well, by the time we got to the game, I told my sister, I was like, if this was on my left side, I would swear I was having a heart attack because it hurt in my chest, in my back, my shoulder, like the whole right side was really not feeling well. But like a true fan, stuck it out, stayed through the game, and then the following week is when I decided, hey, I need to go have this checked out because it felt like I had pulled a muscle in my chest wall, kind of at the time. So I actually went to the doctor for what I thought was a chest wall muscle pull. And that's what got me there. I had no reason to think it was anything other than that at the time.
And so they did more testing. You had a mammogram,
They did.
which
So
which you'd
she,
never had before, right? Because you were
right,
36.
right, with no family history. So she, when the doctor examined me at the primary care office, she felt some lymph nodes in the axillary area or in the armpit. And she decided to go ahead and send me the following week to the breast center. I lived in Greensboro at the time, to the breast center to have that area ultrasounded just to make sure everything was okay. And because it was the women's center where they do mostly mammograms, when I walked in, they said, "Oh, so you're here for your mammogram?" And I was like, "Well, no, I'm 36. I did not sign up for a mammogram. I'm just here to get an ultrasound." And they said, "Well, you're here, and there's justifiable reason to do one, so let's do one." So it was my very first mammogram ever. I'd won. They put me back in the little room to wait without letting me get dressed, and then said, "Come back in. We want a few more pictures." And did another mammogram right then. Um, I waited a little while longer, and then the radiologist came in and said, "We want to go ahead and do an ultrasound, and we're going to biopsy a spot that we have found in your right breast." So they did all of that at the same time, and then gave me an appointment to come back the very next day for results, which is super unusual. Things don't usually come back that quickly. And I know now that they knew then, just from looking at it, exactly what it was. I was not worried at all, but thank goodness. But they definitely knew exactly what it was.
Right. And so things moved really quickly from there. And as every person knows, life doesn't happen in a vacuum. So here you are, the mother of 2 young boys. and you're facing this really serious diagnosis. I mean, how did you cope with that? How did you juggle all that?
Um, well, when I first found out, my sister was with me when I heard the words and sat down in front of the radiologist that said you have cancer. My sister was with me, and my oldest child was in school. He was in kindergarten, and my younger child, who was only 3, was at home with my mom because they had come up so that I could get the results. I can remember my sister looking at me as soon as we heard the words from the radiologist, and she just said, "We've got this. Like, whatever it takes, we've got this. You're not by yourself." And I have no idea what was said after that because my brain kind of turned off and I don't remember anything that happened after that point. But I was very honest. I chose to be honest with my kids right away. As soon as I got home, my oldest was home from kindergarten. My youngest was there with my mom. My mom already knew something was wrong. I was crying before we even walked in the door. So they knew that there was a lot going on and there was sadness, and I didn't want them confused. I mean, their dad and I had split up less than a year prior. They'd been through a lot already. I didn't want them confused. So I sat them both down first and told them in, little kid language that I had cancer, and we didn't know what it was going to look like. There was probably going to be some bad days, and we would just figure it out as we go.
And you have had so much treatment, but you have
Mhm.
also extended your life and obviously joyfully been able to give back to the community. Talk a little bit about how you got involved in many organizations, but specifically the Kay Yow Cancer Fund.
So there's a couple things. When I was first diagnosed and I was so young, I didn't really know anybody that had cancer. I mean, I'd had people in my family that had cancer and passed away. My dad's parents had died of cancer. His brother had died of cancer, completely unrelated to mine. But so I knew about cancer. My sister is a GYN oncologist, so I knew about cancer from her perspective. But I didn't know anyone 36 years old that had cancer. I didn't know anybody young. Everybody that I knew of that had cancer was older, and I didn't really know anybody that well anyway. So it was super lonely for me. I felt like I was the only person in the world not only dealing with the cancer diagnosis, but dealing with a metastatic cancer diagnosis, which is very different. And I told myself early, I said, if ever I have a chance to make a difference in the lives of people like me, so they don't have to feel this lonely feeling that I have now, then I'm going to do whatever I can to help make it a little easier on those people. So that's kind of what kickstarted me wanting to get into the world of volunteering and helping others dealing with this disease. So I started off with some support groups. I started a support group for women under 40 with an organization out of New York in 2013. And we have met every Wednesday night, first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock faithfully since 2013. And there's been so many girls that have been able to call in and that I've gotten to know and love from that. And then I was a keynote at an event several years ago. And Steph, who was the CEO of Kay Yow then, was in attendance at this event. Her and Sarah, Sarah still works for the fund. And after my speech, they came up to me, and I often joke and say I felt like Stephanie was recruiting me, like her full coaching came out, and she walked up to me and said, "We just want to know if you're committed to anyone." And I was like, "What do you committed? I'm not committed. No, I'm not committed to anybody." And so she asked if I would be willing to come and talk to the staff at the fund and just tell my story and just get to know them. So I did that a couple weeks later. And they said one of the most profound things to me that's been said from any nonprofit that I've done work with. After I gave my talk and we chatted for a little while, um, Sarah actually looked at me and said, "We want to know what we can do for you."
Mm,
And I was like, "What do you mean what you can do for me? Like, I'm not used to that. I'm not even sure how to answer that."
right.
So she's like, "We want to help you. Like, what will help you the most?" And I said, "If you want to help me, help me tell my story to as many people as we can tell my story to, because just by people hearing my story, if they're going through what I'm going through, they will not feel as alone, because they need to think of when they're dealing with things, and it'll just help. Metastatic disease was not talked about at all when I was diagnosed. There were no commercials. You didn't talk about it. There weren't support groups. The prognosis wasn't discussed. I mean, on TV during breast cancer month, nobody talked about metastatic disease. You would have never had a stage 4 person in 2011 on any kind of show, special, like nothing. It was very kind of kept to the side and kind of kept quiet. And years after I was diagnosed, it started coming to the forefront. I hear people talk about it, and it's talked a whole lot more. But then it wasn't. So Kay Yow has really helped me get out and tell my story, and then it's been beneficial for both of us. And I've gotten to do some amazing things with them and for them, and vice versa. And it's been a great
What makes
relationship.
them unique? I mean, as you said, there's so many great organizations, cancer organizations supporting research, supporting families, supporting people going through treatment. But what makes them unique to you in your mind?
Well, I think one of the things that makes them super unique is they deal with all cancers that affect women. So it's not just breast cancer. And while breast cancer is personal to me, specifically because I have it, it helps all women dealing with cancer. And it doesn't matter what kind of cancer you have. A cancer diagnosis is a terribly traumatic event in anyone's life. So I like that the people that we can reach is much broader, because you're bringing in people from the entire cancer community, not just the breast cancer community. And I personally believe that part of curing cancer is going to be all of these teams working together. And the cancer is so specific, but I think if you find a treatment for that's going to work, then it can trickle down and help find for others. So I'm all for organizations working together and different oncology groups working together to help find a cure. So they're one of the only groups that does things like that for women. So I
So
think
you
that
were diagnosed in 2011. You started treatment. I talked about the many, many rounds of chemo and radiation you've gone through. How are you doing today?
today I am doing good. I'm doing really good. I had scans. I get scanned every 6 months. So in our metastatic community, we call it scan, treat, repeat. Is kind of how we live our lives. So you get scanned. As long as they come back good, you remain on your treatment, the same treatment, and then however many months or weeks later that your scans are ordered, you do it again and you start all over. And so we live our lives in that kind of cycle of the scan, treat, repeat. The past almost 13 years to remain on my first line of therapy, which is almost unheard of in any cancer community almost. So I've had a recurrence one time in 2019 where it came back in my ribs, and we did a kind of cutting edge technology at Duke, a cryoablation, where they went in and literally froze the cancer to death from the inside out of my bone, and I was able to stay on the same treatment line, and
And
I've been able to do
meanwhile,
that.
the little boys, when you were diagnosed, who were little, are not so little anymore. They're all grown up or close to being grown up.
They are. My oldest that was in kindergarten at diagnosis is a freshman in college at East Carolina University. So I was able to see him graduate, move him into school, do the hardest thing you ever do, the drop offs of your firstborn child to college and leaving him there. And then my youngest, who was 3 at the time, is now he's almost 6'3" junior in high school, and I get to go to all his basketball games and watch.
Katrina, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and sharing about the Kay Yow Cancer Fund and all the great work they are doing. And just, I think when people hear a story like yours, it really makes it more human. It really brings it home to help people understand that this affects so many women. in our community, in our country, in our state. And it's really important that we continue to work towards a cure and also to just continue to support women who are going through this.
Yep. Exactly.
Thanks again. We'll be right back with more about the Kay Yow Cancer Fund.